Hey guys, I am Dani and welcome back here to Summer Skye Gardens. If you are new to my channel, I own a flower farm in Splendora, Texas, which is right east of Houston. We're in Zone 9B, and I am out at the farm today, and I wanted to share with you guys how all my flowers did over the summer, what all I grew, what worked, what didn't grow, kind of like a summer recap. I know a lot of people up north are like really just now getting into summer, but here in South Texas, where it's super hot and humid, we've been in summer since beginning of May. And while it will continue on, I've already been growing for, 3 months now, and I can give you a good recap on what all has been doing well, not doing well, in case you want to use this information for your own summer starting up, the rest of the summer this year, or for next year. Sorry, I had to turn the camera around because the sun is like kind of coming and going with the cloud cover, and the lighting was looking too weird. So overall, my summer flowers have done great. I will say this year we had a slightly, thus far, cooler summer. Cooler meaning we really haven't had any or very few days in the hundreds. Last summer, we had like 3 months in the hundreds and no rain. This year, we've had a lot of rain, slightly cooler temps. It's been a weird year. We had incredible rain and flooding around Mother's Day, which wreaked havoc on a lot of the city and in people's gardens and landscapes and on farms. And then recently, we just had Hurricane Beryl come through last week. And that definitely wreaked havoc on a lot of area, especially like with all of the wind damage, knocking stuff over. I myself have a lot of debris around the farm, a lot of trees that fell, damaged my power line, damaged one of my sheds. So been spending this week cleaning it up, and my flowers, for the most part right now, are pretty much almost done with what I had planted. And that's kind of a combination on just timing, not being able to take care of them properly the last couple of weeks, and then just damage from the hurricane. So my goal right now is to, spend I'm going to take the next like month and a half off from really selling. I'm going to end my bouquet subscriptions early just because I don't have enough really good quality flowers to offer my subscribers after the hurricane damage. So I'm going to refund them, their last bit of the subscriptions, and just take this time until September to clean up, repair, work on some things around the farm to get it really up and ready. And most importantly, set up my new U-pick field, which I'll show you guys a picture, some video here. I am hoping to get this open in September, kind of like late September. If you didn't catch it before, I'll link the video below. Back in the horrific torrential rain downpour we had around Mother's Day, or right before Mother's Day, my U-pick field that I was ready to open up flooded. And so I have been trying to figure out what to do, and I decided to move the field to a part of my farm that, has drainage, or has good drainage, doesn't have any issues. And I've started now preparing that field, and hopefully we'll start planting here really soon. But enough chit chat on what's going on. Let me kind of talk you through. I have a lot of the flowers cut that I can show you. And then there's a few that I'm going to mention that I grew that I don't have in front of me. So the first flower I have to mention for the summer, one of the easiest things to grow, is sunflowers. So this right here is a Pro Cut Gold. It is very past its prime, but my group that I had planted, I cut them like week before last. So this is one of the stragglers, just so I could show you. I like the Pro Cut Gold because they have a gold center instead of a dark. The Pro Cuts make really excellent cut flowers, but there's so many different varieties of sunflowers you can grow. I do have a video about growing sunflowers. If you want to check it out, I'll link it below. But overall, sunflowers are going to do good for most environments, but especially in the heat. They can take the hot sun, they can take the heat. You just got to keep them watered. I will say I found out last summer that once your temperatures start getting up in the hundreds, the soil really becomes too hot to direct seed and to get that seed to germinate. So I had never started sunflowers inside before, but I tried that last summer and that worked out really well, getting them to germinate inside and within a week or two, transplanting them outside. Now, the bummer for me this year with sunflowers was that I had a ton planted in my U-pick field that were going to be for my customers for the U-pick, but also would allow me to cut off of them and use them for my bouquet subscriptions, arrangements, and for my florists, and they all flooded. So the only ones that I ended up replanting and had time to replant was a row of these Pro Cut Golds, which were looking phenomenal. And I came through and I cut them week before last and put them in the cooler. And then the hurricane came. And I was out of town all week because we didn't have electricity. My cooler didn't have electricity. So I couldn't do anything with the sunflowers, which was a huge disappointment. My mom, who was staying here, was able to give a bunch of them away. So that's great. But the bummer for me was that I couldn't sell them or use them. So I'm going to replant a ton of sunflowers in the U-pick field for the fall. They make an excellent fall flower. So, you know, if you're not growing sunflowers, I don't know what you're doing. They're one of the easiest, best flowers to grow in the summer. Now, the next flower I have to mention as well for summer favorites is my favorite flower, and that is zinnias. So I grew a handful of different varieties, and I will say these are on their last leg too. Most of my plants are dead by now. I have some that are replanted, but once again, I had a ton that were going to grow in the U-pick field that flooded and died. So I grew some different varieties, and if you're interested in growing zinnias, I will link that video below. I have a detailed video going through all of the different varieties that I like to grow here on the farm. I also have another video I'll link below kind of showcasing the new floret zinnia varieties that came out this year. So I hope you'll go check that out. But zinnias also love the heat. They're easy to grow, easy to take care of. They pump out a ton of blooms. They look gorgeous. They last, you know, really long in, you know, a vase or an arrangement. And I just think that they're such a quintessential flower to grow for the summer. You can get some issues with fungal disease. I don't usually have too many pest issues. It's more like black spot or powdery mildew, but my way to combat that is just to plant them, you know, every 1 to 2 months. So by the time one group is kind of like petering out, you have a new group that is blooming. So once again, for these, I'm going to plant a whole bunch of these bright, punchy colors for the fall for my U-pick field, but zinnias, I've been growing them for years. They always do wonderful. They're my favorite flower, and I love them, and you've definitely got to grow them. All right, the next flower that I grew that was a surprise hit, both in how well it grew as well as just using it for my customers, was Lisianthus. So these are some of my last blooms. Once again, these started up blooming in like May, and they've been going for a while now, but you can see here is a few different ones that I still have blooming. I grew, I think, 4 varieties this year. 3 of them did really well. 1 of them did not, but I bought plugs. I've tried to grow them before by seed, which is super hard to do. I was not very successful, and I said, screw it, this year for the farm, I'm buying plugs from Farmer Bailey. I planted some in early winter, which did not go very well. My best performers were the ones that I planted in January. So if you live in a hot climate like me, plant them when it's cold outside. They like to get established in the cold, and they take a long time to grow. So, you know, for me, Zone 9B, I planted in January. Those did great. I only had to cover them once when it froze in later January. And then they started blooming in May, and they've just done beautifully. I grow them outside. I don't have a hoop house. They're definitely, you can see this one, which is one of my shorter ones, is long enough to put in an arrangement or sell to a florist. Most of the stems had multiple buds per stem, so very successful. I'm very impressed with the Lisianthus. I mean, I knew they did good in the heat, but you never know. Where I live with like the intense heat and the humidity, I didn't really have any bug or pest issues. I didn't have any disease issues. The only issue was with these white ones, when it would rain, you know, they would get some of the brown spotting and be unusable. So I'm not sure that I'm going to grow the white again. Well, or if I do, maybe like a smaller portion. One thing that I did not do that I highly recommend, and I knew I should have done it, I just kind of ran out of time and was slightly lazy, was netting these. So if it's not raining, they will grow tall and be totally fine. The minute you get any kind of rain or wind, they flop over, and they may still start growing, and you'll start to see like the bloom, you know, go up toward the sky like this. So when you cut it, it ends up looking like this, and it's not very usable. So don't be like me, net your Lisianthus, and they will do great for you. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about are my gladiolas. I don't have any that are like fully open right now, but this is one of them that is just starting to open. And this is ideally when you want to cut it, if you're going to wait a bit to use it, if you're going to give it to your florist, if you're going to put it in a cooler, you want to wait until the buds are kind of colored. Maybe this first one is opening or is open. If you're going to use them right away, let a few flowers open up, but as long as they're kind of coloring up, they will continue to open up the stem here. But these are so easy to grow. You plant the bulb, you leave it alone, and they pop up pretty quickly. They love the heat. I don't have any issues with them. The only issue is kind of like similar to the Lisianthus. You have to net these, which I didn't. And I really regret, because I had a lot of stems that were like super curved, which was a bummer. I did have a lot get damaged from the hurricane, unfortunately. But, you know, this one actually looks pretty good. It's nice and tall and straight. And I've used these. I didn't end up selling really many of these to the florist just because I bought a mix. It was a lot of different colors. And with the bloom times, unfortunately, we're kind of right when the hurricane was coming through. So I did lose a bunch of stems, but I planted a bunch more. They should be blooming maybe within about a month. And yeah, I love them. I think they're beautiful. They make a really striking addition to bouquets and arrangements. They're super easy to grow. They love the heat. So, you know, I don't think glads get enough respect or talked about enough. So check them out if you grow in a hot climate like me. All right, the next flower that I'll talk about is a true favorite for the summer, and that is celosia. So you can see here, I grew some different varieties this year. One of the most fun ones is the Chief series, which creates this like brain corally looking flower. Now this one is actually a bit small. They will get bigger than this, especially if you don't pinch them. The first big bloom will get huge, and my florists absolutely love those. If you do pinch them, they'll put up a few more stalks that'll be smaller, kind of like this, so still totally usable. But I thought these were so fun. I grew like a dark orange and a light orange, so I'm definitely going to grow more of these next year. And then I had the Sunday series, which is always a good choice. They always have lots of different bright, punchy colors. It's a really fun, airy textural element that you can add into your bouquets and arrangements. They dry beautifully, so I love growing celosia so that I can dry a bunch of it and save it for the fall to use for fall crafts. The last one I grew was this Asian garden, which I hadn't grown before, but I really liked. It has this like punchy purpley fuchsia color, and I like that the stems are really long, and it has like several flowers on one stem. So I thought these were really fun and just a heads up that the bees absolutely love celosia. So you will, if you want to support bees, absolutely plant these, but you will see a lot of them flying around. So just be nice and gentle. All right, the next thing I'll talk about is a bit of greenery, and that is mountain mint. See if I can hold it up to the camera here. So you can see this one is just the greenery, and this one has started to bloom. These little like kind of greenish white flowers. Most of mine just stayed with the greenery. I had a few stems that bloomed, and either way I like them. It smells so good, such a lovely minty smell, which is great because a lot of the summer flowers don't have a smell. And you know, you'll see if you're giving an arrangement to somebody or people are picking out one of your bouquets, you know, everybody always wants to lift it up and smell it and see what it smells like. And a lot of times you won't get a smell unless you include something like this. So this has done really well for me. I will say I did grow it in partial shade. I have not grown it in full sun, but in the partial shade, full heat, it's done great. I did start this in the winter and overwintered it, and it's still going strong. It's supposed to be a perennial in my zone, so I'm interested to see how it does kind of going into the fall and in the winter. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to cut it back or just let it die back. We'll see, but I really like it. The only problem with using mountain mint is it can be wilty, especially if you cut it too early. So let the stems get pretty like tough and woody. It's just like basil. You want to let the stems get really strong and woody and then use it. If not, you can always put it in quick dip or boiling water for a few seconds, let it hydrate in some cool water, and it will perk right up. But I was really impressed with this, and I definitely want to grow this again and probably grow more of it next year. And then, of course, with talking about summer greenery, always have to talk about basil. A lot of people love, you know, growing basil. It grows great in the summer as long as you keep it watered. It will get huge and bushy. Most people grow either the lemon variety or the cinnamon. So the difference is this foliage is a little lighter. It has little white flowers. This foliage is slightly darker, has these like little purple flowers. But you can see where one stem, you know, can be pretty full. And like I said, wait till it's woodier, the flowers are really developed, and you won't have wilting issues. I've heard people say they don't like basil because it wilts on them so easily. You've got to let it really bush up and then start cutting on it. But you can see like one stem of these just really could fill up a bouquet and arrangement. It has a really lovely smell. So once again, you're giving like that smell, that greenery, just like the mountain mint. But I always like growing basil. Of course, the bees, this is like their favorite thing on my farm right now. I thought it was the zinnias, but now they are just like all over the basil. So keep that in mind if you have any bee issues. But if you want to support bees, want to support your local pollinators, basil is like a must grow. Of course, you can eat it. I don't particularly like the taste of these varieties, so I grow these just for cut flowers. There's, of course, tons of varieties of basil you can grow in your garden if you want to use it in your kitchen. Now, a few flowers that I grew this year that did not do well, and I'll put some pictures up right here. The first one is feverfew. Now, I have grown this at my home before, and it was beautiful and did great. I grew it pretty much the same here out at the farm. The only difference was at my home, it was in a raised bed. At the farm, it was in the ground, and it did terrible. I had like maybe 5 usable stems out of half a row. The rest of it either didn't bloom or it completely fried up and just looked so yuck. And unfortunately, with all the rain we had this year, with the white flowers, it damaged them and actually made a lot of the stems that ended up blooming, they were unusable. So I'm really on the fence if I'm going to grow this again next year. I love it. It's such a cute little cluster of flowers that you really can't find in other, you know, types of flowers that you can grow in the summer. But the fact that it did so poorly this year, I'm just not sure it's worth my time. So I'll have to do some thinking about that. Another one that surprisingly did not do well for me is yarrow. And I have grown yarrow before and it's done fine. But this year it did not grow well. Now I planted 3 different varieties. I planted a white pearly variety, summer berries, and yellow. My yellow, which is like the native variety, never bloomed. I don't know what happened. I will say I did let that area get a little bit overgrown with weeds, but the yellow never bloomed. The summer berries was all white. I think I got the wrong variety. I did have some usable stems, but overall not a lot. And the like the pearly white, which was a new variety I hadn't grown, that put out some stems, but they were really short and just kind of lackluster. I was very unimpressed. So yarrow is a perennial, and I have some at my home that has been growing for a couple of years. So I'm going to leave them in the ground. They should die back over the winter, and I'll see if they produce any flowers next summer. But overall, just kind of a lackluster performance this year, which was a bummer. Another flower that I grew in the summer, which ended up blooming really early summer, if not like late spring, were my lilies. I love lilies. I grow Asiatics, which don't smell, which I think is great because a lot of people don't like the smell of lilies. It's too strong. So if you're one of those people, if you want to grow scentless lilies, grow Asiatics. They do great in the heat. I've never had like issues with them. I did include them in some of my bouquets and arrangements early on. I will say that most people, though, were not interested in the lilies, especially my florists were not interested, which is really unfortunate because I had a lot of them. I overbought. I grew a lot of them. They're long gone, so I don't have one that I can show you, but I thought they were beautiful. And they do last. They look great in a bouquet. They can really fill it up. So I think it's just too bad that I wasn't able to sell a lot of them. My plan is I left them in the ground, the ones that I didn't cut, that I just let bloom out. They will start to die back end of the summer, into the fall. When that happens, I can dig the bulbs up and then sell them to people that just want to put them in like their landscaping to have them bloom for next year. So that's going to be my plan, to just recoup some of my money for my bulbs. I might put some of the bulbs in the front of the farmhouse or the front of my house at home just to, you know, use them up, and they will bloom again. When you're on a cut flower farm and you're wanting to control bloom time, that's when you need to buy new bulbs because they're frozen. And once they get shipped to you, they are unfrozen. So that's how you can control when they're going to bloom, is you get them shipped in, you know, successions. They will bloom in successions. When you leave them in the ground, or you plant bulbs that haven't been frozen and haven't had that dormancy period, they will just kind of bloom whenever, which can be fine, but you really don't have any control. And if you put out like 1,000 bulbs, they will all bloom at once. So for the farm, I am not buying any lily bulbs for next year. Like I said, I'll have a handful that I'll keep and just plant. And when they bloom, I may or may not use them, but I'm not going to spend money on any new ones next year. Now, a few things that I did not grow and some things I do not plan to grow. I did not grow any amaranth, which I usually do in the summer. So my plan this year is to plant it in the U-pick field and grow some for the fall. Amaranth usually does great in the heat. Make sure you plant them close together so they don't become giant stalks, you know, giant broomsticks. I also do not grow dahlias, and I do not grow roses. Dahlias do not grow well in a hot climate. You will be struggling. You will have to baby them. In my opinion, I have tried for 3 years. I did not have success. They are totally not worth it. They're not worth my time. They're not worth the money. If you have success where you are, cool. For me, it's an absolute no-no. Roses, I do grow roses at my home for my own enjoyment, for my own cutting, and they do well in a hot climate, certain varieties. So if you do want to grow roses, make sure you look up the specific variety, that it's okay for your zone and, you know, your climate. I will say that a lot of the prettier varieties like that I like to grow, they do not do great as cut flowers. They will last a day or two and then they'll start to crap out. So for most flower farms, roses are not, honestly, they're not a great investment, especially in the South. I do know some people that grow them and have had success, but it can be a huge investment. It's a lot of work. So I think growing them for yourself and your own enjoyment, great. Like I do that. I love them. I take care of them at my home. But as a cut flower to be profitable, in my opinion, they're not worth my time and probably your time. So I do not grow them on my farm. The last thing that I'll talk about are my heirloom chrysanthemums. So these you want to start as cuttings. I also have a video about this. I will link it below, but you start them as cuttings that you buy in like the spring or early summer and you plant them and you grow them throughout the summer and then they bloom in the fall. Once the days get shorter and they have a little less daylight, that tells them to shoot up blooms and they will bloom in the fall. For me, it's usually kind of end of October all through November, maybe beginning of December. So I have a lot of my mums from last year. I got some new varieties. I'm doing a mum trial with Harmony Harvest Farm and trialing out some new varieties for them. And so they've all been growing over the summer and then they will bloom in the fall. I'll show you a few pictures right here. They're gorgeous. I love them. They last a long time as a cut flower. Couple of tips for growing them in the summer on your farm is if you have extreme heat like I do, they probably need some shade. I have had success growing them in like partial shade. That has done really well. And you just need to keep up with watering them. Make sure you pinch them by June. And then, you know, usually in the fall, once they start to put on some heavy growth, that's when I start fertilizing them. Like roses, they are heavy feeders and they will benefit from a weekly or every other week application of just like a general purpose fertilizer. So that is a flower that I have grown over the summer that is, you know, not blooming for the summer, but will bloom in the fall and I cannot wait. So I think that's it. Trying to think about everything I grew for the summer. That's kind of the highlights. Most of the things I grew, like I said, had a pretty successful summer up until this past week with the hurricane. But a lot of these will continue to grow for the fall. So my plan is to get them planted or started inside in the next few weeks so that I can get them growing in the fall. They should be blooming by September and will grow until our first freeze, which the last couple of years has not been until December. So you can have like a whole nother round of hot flowers growing at your farm or in your garden if you live in a hot climate like me. So I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I will see you in my next video.